Hello, everyone. This is Mr. Millette with an AP World History presentation. Today's presentation is all about developments in European civilizations between 1200 and 1450, the last of our main topics in our first unit. In this first unit, the Global Tapestry, we have taken snapshots of the political, social, cultural, and economic developments of different late post-classical period civilizations. Last time we spun the globe, we landed in Africa and studied early African civilizations between 1200 and 1450. And today we will spin the globe one last time and find our focus on European civilizations. Like we did with our study of our previous civilizations, we will look for trends, parallels, and points of comparison and contrast among these pre-modern European civilizations and the other civilizations we have studied within the global tapestry. By the end of this presentation, you will be expected to be able to demonstrate your understanding of these three learning objectives. 1, explain how the beliefs and practices of the predominant religions in Europe affected European society. 2, explain the causes and consequences of political decentralization in Europe from 1200 to 1450. And 3, explain the effects of agriculture on social organization in Europe from 1200 to 1450. In the early classical period, European society had flourished economically, intellectually, artistically, and politically with the advent of Greek and Roman cultures. Greek and Roman philosophy, reason, democracy, urban development, economic production, and architectural styles set a very high standard for a European way of life. The classical period was a golden age for European society. And when that golden age came to an end in the 5th century with the fall of the Western Roman Empire, a new era would begin that would have to endure and extend well beyond its potential in order to reach the standard placed by the Greeks and Romans. Oftentimes referred to as the medieval period in Europe, or even traditionally referred to as Europe's Dark Ages, the post-classical period in Europe lasted nearly 1,000 years and retained very little qualities of its Greco-Roman predecessors. Its relative economic backwardness, demographic regression, and intellectual degradation led post-classical Europe to become a vulnerable and politically divided and decentralized region of the world. It did not experience the benefit of centralized and imperial rule as other post-classical societies experienced in the Byzantine Empire, in Chinese empires, and in the Arab Muslim empires. In spite of its setbacks, post-classical Europe paved its own unique path to the early modern period over the next millennia. If any aspect of Roman culture endured in medieval Europe, it was most definitely its religious aspect. That religious contribution was Roman Catholicism, an institutionalized and widely accepted Christian tradition that was spearheaded by the political elites of the late Roman Empire. The strength, popularity, and protection the Roman Catholic Church gave the faith of Christianity did not encompass the entire story of the Christian beginnings. For many Roman political elites of the 1st century CE, Christianity was a foreign faith that disrespected Roman traditions, gods, and the reign of Rome's Caesars. Though Christian origin was in Southwest Asia, its early appeal to marginalized peoples in Southern European societies near the Mediterranean enabled a popular existence of Christianity in spite of initial persecution from Roman political elites. Although many Greeks and Romans had long practiced polytheism, many Greek and Roman poorer classes initially gravitated to the teachings of Jesus and his monotheistic faith. It would not be until the 4th century CE when Roman Christians would be protected by a decree made by Roman Emperor Constantine I in his Edict of Milan, which allowed for Roman tolerance of Christianity. By the end of the 4th century CE, Christianity would be made the official religion of the Roman Empire by decree made by Roman Emperor Theodosius. It is during this time when Christianity would take on a much more Romanesque brand. The Roman Catholic Church would become the prominent institution that promoted that brand of Christianity. After the fall of the Roman Empire, Christianity would still thrive in medieval Europe. Germanic leaders and peoples began to abandon their pagan ways and adopted Christianity. The first of the Germanic leaders to make a conversion to Christianity was the Frankish king Clovis. In 496 CE, just 20 years after the last Western Roman emperor abdicated his throne to a Germanic barbarian, Frankish king Clovis converted from Frankish paganism to Roman Catholicism. Inevitably, a game of follow the leader would ensue, as many Frankish peoples and other Germanic societies began to adopt Roman Catholicism. Clovis's conversion to Roman Catholicism created a special, symbiotic relationship between him and the Pope from Rome. In essence, the most prominent religious figure in Europe, the Pope, would share an important element with the European monarchs that converted to and protected Roman Catholicism. Throughout the medieval period, the position of the Pope strengthened in prestige, political authority, and reach of the Roman Catholic Church. The papacy of 6th century Pope Gregory I asserted papal supremacy over all of Christendom. This meant that all Christians were under the supreme spiritual authority of the Pope, no matter their nationality or socioeconomic or political status. Kings and paupers, men and women, elderly and infants, and everyone in between were subjected to the Pope's authority. Medieval popes wielded immense authority over individuals and heretical movements, such as the power to excommunicate individuals from the Catholic Church. Excommunication resulted in an individual losing their Catholic identity, losing the services provided by their local parish, and jeopardizing their salvation. Popes even had the power of interdict, which meant that the Pope could place a monarch and his entire kingdom into excommunication. Oftentimes, the relationships between popes and European monarchs became tested when political and military issues emerged. Roman Catholic monasteries and convents became the residences of devout monks and nuns to the service of the church. They were instrumental in providing manual labor, orphanages, hospitals, scriptoriums, and academics for its members and its hierarchy. Roman Catholic missionaries were aggressive in the medieval period, and many peoples assimilated into Christian European society. Christianity did not remain unitary. As in the case of many other world religions, Christianity succumbed to division in spite of the Roman Catholic Church's leadership. To Europe's east was the mighty Byzantine Empire, a wealthy and prominent empire that embraced Christian traditions. However, at its capital of Constantinople resided an emperor who entered a power struggle with the Pope from Rome. After a few centuries of religious and political turmoil, the Pope from Rome and the Byzantine Emperor's patriarch from Constantinople mutually excommunicated each other in 1054 CE. This schism, or religious division, divided Christendom into two opposing Western and Eastern halves. To the west, the Roman Catholic Church would reign supreme, but to the east, the Byzantine, or Eastern Orthodox Church, would reign supreme, and this division has never been bridged since that time. As well, Christianity was not the only religion present in Europe. Judaism had retained its presence in different parts of Europe. Although in many cases Jewish communities were left alone to their own religious practices and traditions, in times of great challenges, Christians would practice extreme forms of anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism is the prejudicial and discriminatory actions that people take against the Jews simply because of their differing religious and ethnic identities. Jewish communities suffered immense anti-Semitism during the Crusades and the Black Death, as Christian militaries and Christian radicals targeted them during these times of great challenges to European society. In addition to Judaism, Islam was another religion that gained popularity in small pockets of Europe. Initially, Islam posed a challenge. It posed itself as a challenge to Christian Europe through early invasions by the Umayyad Caliphate. Arab Muslims conquered Spain and established the Islamic State of Al-Andalus, and attempted to push into France during the 8th century. Arab Muslims also developed states in Sicily and Italy. It was incumbent on European Christian political and military leaders, such as Charles Martel and Charlemagne, to defend their Christian populations and territories from Islamic invasion. Christian and Muslim tensions reached their heights during the times of the Crusades to Jerusalem and the Reconquista in Spain in the late medieval period. The year 476 CE was the year that the Western Roman Empire fell to the Germanic barbarian leader Odovaker. Odovaker forced the last Roman emperor, Romulus Augustus, to abdicate his throne. In the wake of the fallen Western Roman Empire, Europe would embark on a new political existence, one that took Europe through political instability, division, decentralization, and vulnerability. Never again would the peoples of Europe exist in the permanence of unity and imperialism that the Roman Empire afforded during the height of its existence. Instead, the former cities, roads, and other architectural and engineering feats accomplished by the Romans would gradually succumb to Germanic control. Germanic peoples settled throughout Europe and developed small regional states and kingdoms. Some of these Germanic states were temporary, as they experienced invasion and military defeat by foreign groups. For example, the Visigoths were the Germanic peoples who initially settled in modern-day Spain, Portugal, and Italy. However, they were ultimately defeated by Islamic Umayyad forces in the 8th century CE. In addition, the Vandals were the Germanic peoples who initially settled in modern-day North Africa, as well as the Mediterranean islands of Sicily, Corsica, and Sardinia. Byzantine forces under Justinian I invaded locations in the Mediterranean and ultimately defeated the Vandals during the 6th century CE. Other Germanic peoples succeeded in building longer-lasting states in the lands of the former Western Roman Empire. Some examples included the Anglo-Saxons in modern-day England, the Lombards in modern-day Italy, and the Burgundians in modern-day France. However, the Franks were by far the most successful state builders of all of the Germanic peoples, as they built the foundations for the modern nation-states of France and Germany. The Franks, under the leadership of Charles Martel, gave rise to the Carolingian Empire of modern-day France and Germany. Martel's grandson, Charlemagne, became the most powerful Carolingian leader and was crowned Holy Roman Emperor by the Pope in 800 CE. When the Carolingian Empire divided during the middle of the 9th century CE, its eastern portion gave rise to a German reign over the Holy Roman Empire, and the Holy Roman Empire became a loosely integrated political entity of German states that existed up until 1806 CE. Many other Germanic states and kingdoms stabilized and gave rise to the beginnings of the modern European states of Spain, unified in 1492, Portugal unified in 1139, England unified in 927, France unified in 987, Italy unified in 1861, and Germany unified in 1871. Granted, many of these places remained politically fragmented long after 1450, as in the cases of Spain, Italy, and Germany. These multiple and independent European states formed out of the necessity of protecting local territories and peoples from invading groups, such as the Muslims or the Magyars and the Vikings. Granted, many of these invading groups succeeded in their invasions and ultimately built their own states inside of Europe. With the absence of a single centralized, unified, and imperialistic state like the Roman Empire, military protection became the responsibility of local political, military, and economic elites. In effect, this led to the political and social foundations of what became known as European feudalism. Feudalism became the decentralized political and social system of Europe that was characterized by national monarchs entrusting their lands to the wealthy landowning nobility. The nobility were expected to fortify and militarily protect the monarch's lands and peoples. The nobility were also responsible for the economic productivity of the land and made feudal contracts with serfs or semi-free agricultural laborers who were bound to the noble's land and were expected to produce and give their surplus as a rent to the nobles. This feudal system provided political and social stability in Europe until the system started to become obsolete in the early modern period after 1450. The late Middle Ages in Europe was a dichotomous time period in that it retained the feudalistic hierarchical social order as had been established in the early Middle Ages. Yet it also challenged that feudalistic social order with a greater awakening of national consciousness within Europe. Definitively, the national monarchs of nations such as England and France relied on strong alliances between themselves and their most prominent nobles. Political decentralization was not the only experience in post-classical Europe. In Southwest Asia and parts of Southeastern Europe, a very centralized and unified political entity reigned. The Byzantine Empire, which was formed out of the remains of the Eastern Roman Empire, succeeded in establishing its political and military control in Constantinople and in much of Southwest Asia and Southeastern Europe. The Byzantines carried on the tradition of an empire by retaining the position of an emperor who wielded political, military, and religious authority in much of the same way the Roman Caesars had done during the age of the Roman Empire. One of the most successful Byzantine emperors was the 6th century leader Justinian I, who succeeded in codifying Roman law, expanding Byzantine territory, and promoting Christianity through the construction of grandiose church known as the Hagia Sophia. Throughout the post-classical period, the Byzantines would retain their imperial structure. Though the empire would suffer great invasions from Arabs, Vikings, and Turks, its basic imperial structure would remain intact until 1453, when the Ottoman Turks took over the city of Constantinople. Throughout the post-classical period in Europe, agriculture was the most significant economic development. From Roman times, agricultural development was most productive in southern Europe, near the heart of the Roman Empire and the Mediterranean Sea. As the Germanic tribes settled and developed stable states and kingdoms, the center for economic and agricultural production shifted from the Mediterranean region of southern Europe toward northern Europe. This was especially due to the feudal system's relative success at providing social order and the establishment of social relationships based on protection and agricultural production. During the post-classical period, in northern European places, such as modern-day France, Germany, and England, the manorial system became the basis for agricultural production. A manor was a large estate overseen by a noble lord and worked by the peasants and serfs that dwelled on the estate. Most manors included agricultural fields, pasture lands for grazing animals, forests for hunting, and freshwater sources for fishing. Additionally, the inventions of the heavy plow, horse collar, and horseshoe, as well as new techniques such as crop rotation, enabled great agricultural production and demographic growth throughout Europe. European productivity also allowed for interregional commercial activity. Once southern Europe stabilized after Islamic and Byzantine invasions, the northern Mediterranean commenced as a great maritime trade network. Additionally, once the Viking raids ended, northern Europe's North and Baltic seas became busy locations of maritime commercial exchange. In the 14th century, a northern European trade network, known as the Hanseatic League, was formed. The Hanseatic League connected many northern European trading cities, including Novgorod in modern-day Russia to the east, London in modern-day England to the west, and commercial centers in between in German, Polish, and Scandinavian cities. These agricultural and economic developments enabled European societies to stabilize and enjoy a high level of economic prosperity that had been unprecedented since the fall of the Western Roman Empire in 476. Additionally, these economic developments led to great demographic increase, which combated the demographic decline that was experienced in the first centuries of post-classical Europe. Also, these economic and demographic transitions enabled both southern and northern Europe to develop urban centers that fostered more economic diversity and enhanced quality of life for their inhabitants. This urban development was a great change from the rural traditions that characterized Europe in the early post-classical period. Our study of pre-modern European civilizations concludes the civilizations we will be focusing on in Unit 1, the Global Tapestry. Consider the rigidity of pre-modern Europe's feudal system. Does that compare with India's caste system or China's hierarchical system? Was Christianity a cultural influence on European civilizations, to the extent that Islam, Buddhism, and Hinduism were cultural influences on Asian and African civilizations? Did Europe's political landscape mimic that of other places who failed to establish single unified imperialistic empires? Was Europe's economic and technological developments on par with those from Asian, African, and American civilizations from the global tapestry? These are the types of questions that inquisitive world historians would ask while they're learning about different civilizations. Then, once making those questions, they'd conclude an answer and then begin analyzing how and why those parallels are so similar or so different among these civilizations.